Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I'm your host, Tim Keller. Along with me, as he always is Mr. Moneybags, as I'll call him, Mr. Matt Disher. I saw your post. You and the wife recently visited a local casino. Big winners.
Yeah, so this was a birthday party for a friend of ours, and
Mm.
he rented one of those party buses. And it's kind of funny because it's a bunch of 40 somethings jumping on a bus and pretending like we're young again. And so we went down. We made a couple of stops on the party bus, but we went down to the Hard Rock Casino here in Cincinnati. And my wife and we're not gamblers, so we get a couple 20s out of the ATM. We go to a slot machine. I lose half of that $20 bill right away. I put in $20. I'm down to $10. I'm like, all right, well, this is dumb. So she's like, let's go find another slot machine. She actually puts in the money. We have no idea that we're winning. We actually did win $73. We won $73. We didn't realize we were winning $73. We had no idea what we were playing. We just kept pushing the button, and it kept saying we were winning, but it was like a 25-cent slot.
Yeah.
So we were winning, but then I cashed that out, and I had a couple more bucks in my pocket. So I went to another machine, put that money in, and I drained it out again. Like, apparently I can't push the buttons. My wife has to push the buttons because I have terrible luck. So I got myself down to 10 cents.
There you go. Yeah, I saw the voucher. Your wife was holding the voucher, and you were holding the dime itself. It was a magical moment caught on camera.
It really was. I should try to find that because it became like our funny little picture that we're sharing on social media right now. One of our friends took the picture, and
it's a fantastic photo. You guys look like you had the time of your lives.
Let me pull it up here, and I'll see if I can't.
Well, while you're trying to do that, I actually spent right after we got out of the Corps, I ended up moving down to South Jersey. I lived in Atlantic City for about 3 years. Not much of a slot machine guy. I was always more of the card games or the table games. But whenever, family or friends would come down to Jersey and they'd want to go to the casinos, most of the time, those individuals, there's the picture. There is Matt with his dime, and there's Mrs. Disher holding the cash out voucher for 10 cents.
10 cents.
Man.
Here's what I hope happened. I left that cash out voucher just sitting on a slot machine, and we left. I'm hoping some career gambler picked it up and made some money off of it.
10 cents, yeah.
So if you were at the Hard Rock Cincinnati over the weekend and you picked up a cash out voucher for 10 cents and ended up winning money off of it, you're welcome. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, you never know. You never know. But I had a buddy come down and visit me down in Jersey. He didn't feel comfortable playing on table games or in the poker room or anything like that. So he just wanted to hit the slots. And I said, all right. So I put $20 in a slot machine. It was called the Sizzling Sevens. And I'm just sitting there, just pushing the button. And as the reel stopped spinning, flaming seven. And now I'm sitting here waiting for the bells and whistles to start going off, and nothing's happening. And it goes like ding, ding. And I'm like, no, what? It's the jackpot. What's going on? And I start like jerking the machine around a little bit, and I grab somebody that's working the floor. I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, well, what'd you bet? I was like, I just hit this button. He goes, oh, you got to play max bet. I was like,
so what'd you end up winning? You didn't win the jackpot because it wasn't max bet.
It wasn't max bet. I won like $10 on a 25-cent bet. So I mean, I can't complain about that. The payout's great, but yeah.
I rarely go to casinos. I will go every once in a while. Typically, it's if somebody's having a birthday of some sort, and that's where they want to go. And so we'll go down there. And we have a rule that once we get ahead, we just quit. We're not gamblers. And every once in a while, I'll sit down and play some blackjack and things like that. But last time I was there was a Michael Jackson slot machine. It was like the biggest, prettiest machine. It was right when some of the machines became these big digital screens. And I sat down, threw a $20 bill in there, and just started pushing buttons. And same thing, like I think I walked away with $150. Okay. And so then this time I tried to find that same slot machine that's gone, which much to my dismay, Michael Jackson's no longer there. But I was hoping to find him.
For your story, you said you have no luck. I had a buddy down in Jersey, same deal. So whenever we'd all go out as a big group of friends, I'd always follow my buddy Joe around. And as soon as he got up from a table or up from a slot machine, I just threw $5 or $10 in there and start hitting buttons. And sure enough, Joe was getting up and walking away because he was having no luck. And you'd hit for a couple of bucks, and where'd he go? I'm gonna go find him. Oh, he's getting up from that machine. I'm gonna jump on that one.
Yep.
you make a couple bucks off of a good old Joe because he
Yeah.
had no luck, and you take it all from him.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely.
I did want to mention before we get into any other news that yesterday, December 7th, marked the anniversary. 50 years, 60 years.
We're talking 1941. We're talking 80.
Yeah,
Is it
80 years.
80,
Yeah,
80
80
years
years.
now?
Yeah, math is hard. Yeah,
It
yeah,
is
80. Yeah,
math for Marines.
yeah, 1941 to 2020. Yeah, it works out. Yeah,
Yep.
80 years was the 80th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Um, so I had the post up yesterday on our Facebook page. The attack started just before 8 a.m. Hawaiian time. The Imperial Japanese Navy kind of surprised us and everybody else in the world, killing 2,403 individuals that day and wounding another 1,178. I think they sunk 4 of our 8 battleships that were in the harbor that day. Many of them were resurrected. Yeah, Matt's got some of the pictures up. You can look on military.com. They have an article, 14 rarely seen photos that reveal the horror of the attack of Pearl Harbor. And that's where some of those pictures are from. You can see some of the ships listing as after they've been struck. You see some of them smoking and on fire. The one picture that really grabbed my attention in this article, though, is it is a photo of a mock of the Japanese harbor of Pearl Harbor that apparently was being made up so a film could be made.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a Japanese filmmaker was probably going to make a film speaking of the triumphs they've had that day. There's also pictures of Japanese planes preparing to take off. There were 2 waves of the attack. You know, the first one really caught everybody off guard. The second one, there was a little more anti-aircraft fire to be had. But there's pictures of the West Virginia, the Arizona. There's pictures of bombers that had flown from California and had just made it in time for the second wave to hit. And these American bombers also got struck while sitting on the tarmac and things of that nature. But yeah, this is a collection of photos that are I don't want to say they're good to look at, but they are good references for those that may not remember or may not have ever heard.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. The more I think about this, it's 80 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is. I was thinking about this when we approached the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. This, Pearl Harbor was the same type of event for that generation. It was this attack that you'll never forget. The interesting thing is, we're 80 years later. The generations currently, I don't think, are as familiar with this. When I was growing up, I remember we would have veterans come to school and talk about Pearl Harbor, and you would hear about it quite often. This time around, I didn't hear about it as much. It was kind of interesting how little I hear about it year after year, which is kind of it's kind of upsetting. But at the same time, I understand time goes by. At some point in time in our lifetimes, this is going to be 100 years ago. 20 more years, this will be 100 years ago, which just seems like it is a lifetime. It's more than a couple of generations.
Absolutely.
I've had the pleasure of, or the honor rather, of visiting Pearl Harbor a number of times. The first time I was actually in the Marines, and we were stopping in Pearl Harbor as part of our Westpac deployment, and so we rolled right into the harbor, and we had to salute the USS Arizona, which
the
sits
memorial
there, the memorial there, the Arizona Memorial, because it is still a commissioned ship, to my understanding, which means the crew still sits in that ship. Because it's sunk with the crew in it, they have not decommissioned it, or it's still in service. And so when you roll past it, you salute it. You salute all senior ships as ships are passing in the water. And I've been able to visit the Arizona Memorial a handful of times, and there's still oil coming up out of the water from the ship. So you'll see like this oil sheen in the water, and you can look down into the water and see the different parts of the ship. It's just so it's astronomical to me, because I was always a history buff. This kind of thing, and when I stand there and I look around and I'm thinking to myself, this is where this attack took place. This was a huge event that thrust us into the largest conflict in recent history, and probably in the history of the world. It was the largest conflict in terms of, mobility of militaries and deaths and casualties and things like that. There's also, in true fashion these days, and this conversation still goes on, that there's a conspiracy here that perhaps this was allowed, that it was the catalyst to allow America to enter the war, because up until 1941, December 7th, the United States was not in the greatest battle the world was waging. We were actually one of the last countries to join it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was this argument that at some point in time we had to join it. And interestingly, the history books don't talk about this as often, but there was a lot of dissent among Americans, similar to what we experienced with Vietnam and the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, where people were like, it's not our fight. Let's stay out of it. And it's kind of funny because the history books, you don't hear as much about that. So you have to go digging for that sort of information, that there were people taking to the street saying, we don't belong in this war. But I think it became pretty evident once this attack took place that we should be involved, or we have to be involved. The other interesting thing about the attacks on Pearl Harbor were that the U.S. aircraft carriers were not on station. They were out to sea and were not able to be found by the Japanese bombers. And so that's another, and adds fuel to that conspiracy theory that they did that on purpose, because had we not had the aircraft carriers been damaged or sunk, there's no way we could have waged war in the Pacific effectively.
I was always under the assumption, I know that President Roosevelt had most of the fleet moved over to Pearl Harbor and to be in the Pacific, I think partially as a strategy to keep the Germans from possibly coming over and striking them on the East Coast of the country, thinking it's probably a little safer over there to keep our fleet. And so about a year and a half before these attacks happened, a lot of the fleet moved out there to the Pacific. So it just so happened we had a large majority of our naval fleet in that area for these attacks to happen. And speaking of, these attacks and then that spurring us to join, like you said, most likely the largest conflict that has ever taken place, a young man at the time, an 18-year-old named Mr. Bob Dole, who we all will remember as Senator Bob Dole, recently passed away on Sunday at the age of 98. But Senator Bob Dole was a World War II veteran, had 2 Purple Hearts for his service during World War II, spent over 36 years in Congress, was a vice presidential candidate as well as a presidential candidate, lost to, who did he lose to? He lost to Bill Clinton on his second term. But 98 years old, Bob Dole, because of his injuries suffered during his time of service, was a huge advocate for veterans' rights, for discrimination against employment, education, and was a huge activist for the Americans with Disabilities Act. So, he'll be fondly remembered by both sides of the aisle, by Democrats and Republicans. But his casket's going to lie in state in the Capitol, as some of his political comrades get to honor him tomorrow. If you don't know what lie in state means, they do it with popes, they do it with political figures. Essentially, the body or the casket will be put inside of in this case, a building down there in the U.S. Capitol, and people can go and pay their respects to those individuals. So, this casket will be somewhere in the state capitol, in the U.S. Capitol, where people can go and pay their final respects to the senator. It's
interesting that, Bob Dole is one of these. I remember this because he ran against Bill Clinton in my lifetime. I remember that presidential race. I remember these guys being on TV quite a bit. I'm sure that the younger generations probably have no idea who Bob Dole is or was. And the big piece of this is that, unfortunately, sometimes it takes some of these people passing away to understand what their legacy was. So, for example, Bob Dole, having served in World War II honorably, having been injured in combat in some of those major campaigns, I'm sure a lot of people never knew who Bob Dole was. Again, younger generations, let alone the fact that he was fighting in the conflicts of World War II. George H.W. Bush is another one, or otherwise affectionately known as George Bush Sr., who was actually a pilot in the Pacific in World War II and was shot down his aircraft was shot out of the air. And so that was one of those things. I never knew that until I was older in life. I knew it before he passed away, but I had not known, again, being a history buff, I always found it fascinating that these are living legends and heroes among us, and people that continue to serve, like Bob Dole served in the military and then served a whole career honorably as a politician. Unfortunately, we talk about this a lot on our podcast, that politics has gone awry over what feels like the last 10 years. It's slinging garbage at each other, and social media adds fuel to the fire. But there are people here, as you just mentioned, Tim. Bob Dole was a big advocate for the Americans with Disabilities Act, among other things, which is that is a huge game-changing act. The laws and the policies therein are huge game-changing things for people with disabilities. It's the reason why you have wheelchair-accessible doors on public buildings and bathrooms with handicap accessible stalls and parking spaces, and this is just naming the things that we can all relate to as we're driving around or walking around in a building. But there's so many other items there that come down to like the sheer lack of or slowdown of discrimination for people with disabilities, and the fact that companies and businesses now have to offer reasonable accommodations if somebody has a disability. So these are big things that significant people have accomplished throughout their years, and we don't see a lot of this stuff these days. We just see the stuff that ends up again on the media and social media. Yeah, we don't like this guy because he did this, and I don't agree with that, and I hate him, and
he's not on my team. So
right? We've gotten away from, as you mentioned, like both sides of the aisle. We've gotten away from that sort of handshake. Like, it doesn't mean that they're your enemy. When you're playing another basketball team on the court, it doesn't mean you hate these people just because they fouled you once or twice. But we, as a society, I think we've gotten away from some of the major monumental strides that have been made from some of these leaders.
Yeah, Bob Dole in 1945 was charging a German position while serving in Italy, and he was hit by a shell fragment that crushed 2 of his vertebrae and paralyzed his arms and legs. He spent 3 years in a hospital trying to recuperate. He never regained use of his right hand. So.
Yeah, and I remember that from as a kid during that presidential election. I remember he was always holding a pen in his right hand. His hand was always closed and up to his chest. And I just thought that was a thing he did. And then I finally asked my dad, I was like, why is that guy always holding a pen up to his stomach or whatever? And he said, well, he actually is. And of course, I'm a 10-year-old at the time, or 15 or whatever. Why is this guy? Who is this guy? And my dad had to explain to me that he had been injured in combat and he simply didn't have use of that hand. So they put a pen in it and he would walk around that way, which was a perfectly reasonable explanation for why he was like that. But I didn't know until later on that he had been injured so significantly in combat.
Yeah, absolutely. So rest in peace, Mr. Dole, Senator Dole. Our next news article, another one that comes from military.com, teams of Pentagon and intelligence community experts would rapidly respond to military UFO sightings and conduct field investigations under newly unveiled defense legislation set to pass Congress. So, Matt, this is an article you pulled up. This is essentially talking about they are trying to instill legislation that will essentially form units that are responsible for doing in-depth investigations and reportings on what they now like to refer to as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. So it would be a bi-yearly report to Defense Secretary and Defense Cabinet, and then it would be a yearly report to politicians on these UAPs. This is coming off of some recent reports that I guess didn't satisfy those looking for the details. So it looks like the Senate is looking for a team of UFO chasers.
Here's the thing about this, and this thing got kind of blown out of proportion a couple of years ago when the Navy actually came out and said, yes, there are UFOs, and without context, that ended up on social media, and people were like, "There's UFOs! Look, it's aliens!" That's literally that's kind of how it was happening. And I'm going to share a screen share here, a screen grab of There's entire videos out here of naval aircraft. They have these awesome tracking systems. There are military systems that can track things flying through the air, from missiles to aircraft, and basically takes images of them and shows their velocity, can lock onto the heat signature of said vehicle and just follow it around. So this is a screen grab from one of those videos. The thing has been taken out of context, and the thing we got to remember is the Navy didn't necessarily say these were extraterrestrial UFOs. They didn't necessarily admit that these are things from another planet.
They didn't know what it was, though.
Right. Remember, the term UFO is unidentified flying object. It's as simple as that. It's unidentified, and it's a flying object. And then now they've added different acronyms. I think what they have determined is that, with the advent of things like civilian drones and the military use of drones, and I know that we're talking about China has a supersonic weapon of some sort now that's, it goes faster than anything else we've seen, and it can move around and things like that. I think what they're trying to identify is that these things, civilian or military or otherwise, are flying around out there, and in some cases there are near misses with commercial aircraft. In some cases there are near misses with military aircraft. That in and of itself is concerning. You can't start having 737s brought down by Bob down the street flying his drone too high, right? And there are limitations on that as well, legal limitations. But I think the other piece of this is, as we're looking at this technology advancing, who's to say that these aren't aerial phenomenon being used by terrorist groups or enemy military actions, and they're not major-sized aircraft. So you very well could fly one of these offshore, come into a place, pack it with explosives or weapons or cameras or whatever, and fly it into a building for that sake, and take pictures of things or detonate it or do something along those lines. I think that that's where this whole conversation goes, is that we have to have some control. Traditionally or historically, it was we can see aircraft on radar. Well, now you're flying drones in 1 foot off the ground. There's no way to know what's there. So as much as we like to think it's aliens, I use that funny cartoon voice. That's what people, I see that when people are like,
automatically some people go there. Yeah.
I knew it.
Protecting our national security's interest means knowing who and what is flying in U.S. airspace. One politician said, and right now our system of tracking unidentified UAPs is scattered throughout the Department of Defense and other departments and agencies of the federal government. So essentially this is taking, hey, we have 5 or 6 different agencies or entities that are all in one way, shape, or form kind of tracking a little bit of this. Let's, bring the best of all 5 of these worlds together. You are now the team that is overseeing the entire thing. But yeah, the Navy in 2004, and then again off the east. So that was in San Diego in 2004. And then in 2015, another infrared video that similar to what the screen grab that Matt is showing looks like. But the Navy did confirm that there were some UAP sightings. And, again, not saying it's extraterrestrial.
Right.
It's just an unidentified aerial phenomenon. So they are trying to figure out exactly what these things are and what they can do going forward.
A couple of things come to mind when we're talking about this. One, the fact that there are multiple different agencies trying to track these things and track them down. This is what it brings to mind, the conversation during and after 9/11, which was the foundation of the Department of Homeland Security. And that was that you had all these different agencies working and not sharing information. They were working toward the same objective, to know where terrorists were, to know where criminals were, to compile this intelligence, et cetera, but none of them were talking to each other. So it seems like here, even 20 years later, we're still having this issue. You got 5 different agencies tracking UFOs or whatever they're calling them now. And none of them are the official source or the truth, so to speak. That is in and of itself concerning. But I think that overall, the idea that these things are flying in and out of here, we're a little bit behind as a country. From what I understand, what I hear, we're talking about the cybersecurity threats, we're talking about the financial security threats, and now we're talking about physical technology, things like this, unmanned aerial vehicles and stuff like that can just be flown in, and we have no way of tracking them or shooting them down or disabling them or doing anything. And we just talked about Pearl Harbor. The basis of the Pearl Harbor attack was that the Japanese Imperial Navy was able to just sort of sneak up off the coast of Hawaii and launch a major assault, and nobody knew they were there. Here we are, reminiscent 80 years later. There are these guys sneaking in, whoever this is, and I'm not saying that these are enemies. These are just, again, UFOs, probably flying around, and nobody knows who's controlling them, which can create major catastrophe through military action or civilian accidents or otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, even if it's just being an issue with flight patterns, if it's getting in the way of commercial airliners, military, flights, those things, you're putting human lives at risks with potentially unmanned aircraft. And, the objective here is to try to keep as many people safe as possible.
Right.
But yeah, so going from one creepy story to another, this one I saw earlier this week, and this one really creeped me out. This one coming from NPR. Plenty of sources are reporting it, though. Scientists have discovered the first self-replicating living robots. Just the headline alone scares the daylights out of me. So scientists from the University of Vermont, Tufts, and Harvard took stem cells from frogs and turned them into tiny little robots. These tiny little robots are called Xenobots. And then the scientists sat back and watched what would happen. So one of the scientists, Michael Levine, said that if they find themselves in an environment with other cells sort of sprinkled on the bottom of a petri dish, what these robots will do is they go around and collect these other cells, gather them together into small piles, and these small piles then become slightly smaller xenorobots, the next generation of robots. So again, I mean, in no way, shape, or form am I a scientist. I'm not going to try to even begin to think of how this is possible. But they've created autonomous robots. They have no brain, but yet they are.
We've already seen this movie.
Matt throwing up pictures of the
Terminator and the T1000.
There you go. Yeah. So these are just tiny, tiny little cells that are, acting as little robots, but we're seeing them have like the free will to reproduce and to recreate, which baffles my mind. It beyond my own comprehension. I cannot begin to think, how is this possible? They are saying, though, that the science is hopefully going to lead to potential benefits for healthcare, human healthcare. They're saying that if they can find these xeno robots that will be able to reproduce, in this case themselves, maybe they can teach them to reproduce human cells, reproduce human organs. So things like birth defects, dying organs inside the human body, things of that nature. So hopefully they can push this in the right direction. But I think this is right on that edge of, in the wrong hands,
terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, is completely gonna go sideways, and we may see the T1000 someday.
I've got another quote here, and it is, "This is the best thing to happen, and it's going to be amazing for our future." And that's from Miles Dyson, the CEO of Cyberdyne Technologies. If you've ever, if I don't know if that name rings a bell. But that's what he said. This will be the best thing. So, and his friend Arnold agrees.
Oh, yes, very good.
I'll be back.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
I mean, we've talked about this on here. We were talking about I think it was Boston Dynamics or whatever, one of those companies that are making the dog robots. Yeah. Yep. And there are some videos. There are some terrifying videos out there on the internet. You can look these up, and they are of these robots that they've created that walk like humans or walk like dogs, and they'll kick them and they'll punch them and they'll try to knock them over, and these things will do backflips, and it's insane to watch it because it's terrifying. These things are like self-leveling, and they walk around and they solve problems. They open doors and they close doors and they do all this stuff. Now I realize we're probably a few years away from intelligence, but the story goes for every one of those apocalyptic robotic movies is that these things become self-aware because they're designed. I think it was I, Robot with Will Smith is another movie from the late 90s or early 2000s. where the fundamentals or the rules for the robots became that they could not do any harm to humans, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that rule was then twisted out of proportion by the robots to say that humans are doing harm to themselves by having free will.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly humans don't have free will and the robots try to take that away from them. And so,
yeah, it's I saw, I want to say it was Joe Rogan who first shared it that I saw it, and I was like, this can't be real. And I clicked on the article and I started to read, and I sit there kind of with my mouth agape, like, how's this possible? Like, what about, they just come to these little Xeno robots come to one day and they go, well, we must live on. And so they, of their own free will, start to reproduce and recreate. It's wild.
Well, and it's going to take somebody programming them to have intelligence. I mean, it's not artificial intelligence like, right now, artificial intelligence to the everyman looks like when you go on a website for Eddie Bauer to order clothes and a little thing pops up. It's like, well, what are you looking for? And it's like, I'm looking for men's pants. And then it takes you there. That's not really intelligence. It's just taking a list of things and allowing you to select from them. But there are real things like artificial intelligence that make decisions on how they're going to approach a problem. And that's when it becomes, again, to quote the Terminator movies, self-aware. It becomes self-aware and it realizes it's not there just to solve problems, but also it could be shut down. And the prospect of it being shut down by the humans is now it's a self-awareness. It's a problem to solve. Well, how does it solve itself being shut down by the humans? It fights back or it duplicates itself or whatever. It literally is every movie. I'm not even a sci-fi buff, but I've seen all these movies and they are terrifying.
The headline alone scared the bejesus out of me. I don't like the fact that something like this is beginning to happen. Something else. Go ahead, Matt.
Real quick, I'm going to say this, that the Terminator storyline, by the way, this whole self-awareness of robots, etc., that movie came out in 1984. So think about how, that's almost 40 years ago, 38 years ago, or 37 years ago that...
Math is hard.
Right, math for Marines. That this idea was conceptualized. This is before computers were on everybody's, laptops and things like that. And so this was before AI, as we know it, was even a thing. So, just bear that in mind. This idea is not new by any means.
Yeah. From one creepy article to another, we're going to keep the roll going here. China has learned to modify its weather. They have control of the weather to a certain degree. I know that my unit over there in Camp Pendleton, it seemed like California is just a beautiful, sunny and 70 degrees, and once a year it would rain. And it seemed like it always happened to be right there on Camp Pendleton. The joke was, this is us testing how to control the weather. It sounds like China may have figured this out through a process called cloud seeding. The Chinese weather authorities have been able to create clouds. So in this case, the Chinese Communist Party was getting ready to celebrate its 100th anniversary of being in control of the country. And there was concern of, air pollution and, rain possible for that day. So the way to deal with this is we'll create rain, knock that pollution down, and the chances of then natural rain happening because of this artificial rain decrease greatly. So the Chinese weather authorities have spent billions of dollars working on this technology. And what they do, they add chemicals like small particles of silver iodide to the clouds, causing water droplets to cluster around them and increasing the chances of precipitation. So they're adding chemicals to the air, creating artificial clouds, which then create the artificial precipitation and knocking down the chances for the real precipitation to happen. So they did this. There was talks about it. They were doing it back in 2008 during the Beijing Olympics. They've done it now for this political gathering that they were going to have, and that their thoughts by 2025, they want to be able to control the weather in this sort of way over their entire country. I know that they were doing a big part of this to help with the precipitation levels over certain areas of farmland to help with the crops and the growing of those sort of things. But yeah, this is another one. I don't know if I should be worried about the fact that China can make it rain or not rain for a certain day or time, but it's just
There,
another thing that we see China's out there ahead of us on.
there could be, and by the way, like you just said, they were doing this for the Olympics in 2008. I don't think that this is a new concept. I think that the idea to seed rain clouds and force it to rain, I think that that's probably something that we've known about for some time. The interesting thing, I don't know if this could go one of two ways. Obviously, messing with nature is always terrifying to me because what are the implications? There used to be a commercial and it was like, what happens when this buffalo sneezes and it causes all the buffaloes to run and then it puts clouds of dust up in the air and then et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole story about dropping a couple of wolves into Yellowstone and how it'll change the outcome or the
entire ecosystem,
the path of rivers, and it changes everything. I don't know if a couple of rainstorms will modify the outcome of humans in the future, but there could be a positive to this, and part of that could be, I don't know, environmentally, there could be a positive outcome of this. In other words, to help clean the air, perhaps, or I don't know, something along those lines. You know, and I am not an environmental expert. I just feel like if we can control the weather in that regard, first, I want two things to happen. One, I don't want light dustings of snow anymore in Cincinnati. I want lots of snow. I want it to get ugly out there. But secondly, I do wonder if, can you solve droughts with this? And droughts, you know, arguably, some people might say, well, that's messing with nature. But if the drought is caused by human interaction or human meddling or as we say, climate change, could we solve some of those problems by cooling the landscape, by seeding rain, by causing rain to happen? Or do you need the atmosphere to be full of moisture in the first place? And if it's not, as you mentioned, like Camp Pendleton, you wouldn't get rain for a year until you went to the field and it would pour on you all day long.
Yeah.
I wonder how all that looks, if there's anything that we can do environmentally by controlling the weather, by maybe reinstating some normalcy to things.
Yeah. Yeah, it was always the joke that, you know, we can't have them out here training in perfect conditions. We have to throw them a curveball. So the second we leave and, you know, they're out from under the cover, we're going to just let it rip. And these guys are going to have to figure it out. It's just
right.
It's just kind of how it went over there. But yeah, this was another article that I saw and I was like, wait, China can control the weather now? What the hell are they doing over there?
Yep. So. It's frightening. It's terrifying that, you know, again, it's human meddling. You're meddling with nature. I just never liked that idea anyway. But of course, we do it all the time. We, you know, the whole everything that's going on in the world right now, every hot topic, a vaccine is human meddling with nature, right? Medication, modern medicine, driving cars, for flying airplanes. It's all defying nature.
Potentially, the reason for the vaccine, human meddling. Potentially,
yeah. So. A whole other conversation. I had this conversation with somebody recently. Same type of thing. I was like, but if we are trusting the science, would the science not say that we should just let nature run its course? Not saying I agree or disagree with that. I'm saying that was part of the conversation, which was an interesting conversation. If we could admit that this was human meddling to create this thing in the first place, then I think more people will be more readily willing to take proper precautions and steps. But if we're saying this thing just naturally occurred and spread around the world in like 1 month and it's wreaked havoc on economies, and then we're saying, hey, trust the nature, trust the science, would trusting the science not be that we should let it run its course, as we should have throughout entirety of history for every major illness? And again, I'm not bringing this up. I have to have these disclaimers when I have these conversations. I'm not saying this because I believe like that's the way I'm thinking. I'm saying this for the sake of the conversation. When smallpox was a thing, when, you know, before we came up with antibiotics, et cetera, going back in history, is creating modern medicine meddling with nature? And I would say it probably is. People are staying alive a lot longer. I should probably be dead a couple times by now, but thanks to modern medicine, I'm not. So I think that we could probably say that for a lot of us. It's interesting stuff.
it yeah, it's interesting that these people are smart enough to figure these things out, and to people like me who aren't smart enough to figure these things out, and I just read the articles, I go, oh my god.
My
So
God, you can make it rain?
it's scary. They can make it rain, and robots can reproduce.
Well, here's the other,
What a weird
one of the other
world.
things that I'm still wondering. I still don't know how a man in a red suit on Christmas Eve can get down the chimneys of billions of houses across the
Mm.
world in the course of basically 24 hours. You answer me that, and I will believe anything else that you can tell me. But I don't get it because I've never seen him come down my chimney. I don't know how all that stuff gets there.
Well, Matt, I would say that you're probably in for pretty big spoiler
Yeah.
very shortly. I'm not gonna ruin it for you.
Okay.
Just saying. I will say though that if you're right, this man could be convicted of so many breaking and enterings every year. I mean,
Right. Right. I wonder what if there's any laws that protect him. I also wonder if the Navy is using their fancy technology to track him as he's.
it's true.
You know what? I just thought of something. Maybe that's what the UFOs are.
There you go. They
Maybe
didn't say
he's
what
just
time
not.
of year they saw these things.
Yeah, practice runs. He's just doing practice runs. New technology.
Yep, he's just out there working it. Good for him. Good for
Good
him.
for him.
Yep. The last article we have pulled up today is another one from military.com. The headline reads 10 things you should start doing today. Matt, you again pulled this article up, but this one I absolutely love. We'll go down the list here. So number one, know your numbers. Get a physical, find out what your basic health numbers are, your height, weight, body fat, blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, all of those sort of fun things. For men of a certain age, it's also good to know what your testosterone levels are at. Just throwing that out there, gents.
Yeah, this is all stuff. By the way, this is not just for people in the military or
Yeah.
just people out of the military. Like that, what I found
This
interesting about this is like we don't talk enough. We're always talking about headlines and politics and current news stories and things like that. I don't think any of us, not just you and I, Tim, but anybody is talking enough about staying healthy and staying, financially healthy too. I think is another piece that probably we're not even going to talk about in this article, which is another topic that we could probably bring up, which we've had Tim Kester on here before talking about financial health. But this one struck me as this article, these 10 things struck me as something that a lot of people I think forget to keep doing when they leave the military. If I could go back in time and keep in shape and keep the same diet that I had in the military and keep the same physical regimen, I would love to do that. I let it slip when I got out. I didn't stay as active, and it's really hard to get back to that. So sorry, go ahead.
No, you're 100% right there, Matt. And I think I pretty much kept the same diet. I ate like a turd while I was in, and I ate like a turd while I was out. And eventually you have kids and a family, and you start to slow down on the extracurricular type activities, and just you become a little more sedentary. And if you keep eating at the same pace and your decline of just daily activity decreases, it's when things go the wrong way.
And you talk about knowing your numbers, your height and weight and body fat and blood pressure and cholesterol and blood sugar numbers. These are things that I had not taken into account until I was out of the military for 10 years. Then I went to the doctor. They're like, you want labs? And I'm like, what's that mean? They're like, we'll tell you all your numbers. And I mean, they can diagnose cancers. They can tell you that you're going to have a heart attack in 2 years. They can, you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. They can tell you all these things that you can avoid. The other thing is, and this is, again, going along with current events, one of the big things that we haven't heard a lot about is people's, the comorbidities. When you hear about COVID or any other illness, when you have additional comorbidities, when you have additional things like if you might be overweight or you have high blood pressure or high cholesterol, all those things can contribute to your ill health and or can be the outcome of I'm alive or not, or I'm hospitalized or not when you get any illness. This isn't just specific to COVID. Any illness. We don't talk about that on a daily basis, that like the flu, the seasonal flu affects people more who are generally unhealthy compared to somebody who might be keeping track of their numbers or regularly exercising or eating the right diet. So I think it's an important thing to know your numbers and understand what those things mean.
Absolutely. Again, not a licensed physical trainer of any kind. But for your numbers, just a very easy and relatively cheap supplement. Creatine will help with things like blood pressure, with cholesterol. There are studies out there that prove that it has some uh, boosts for cognitive function as well. So very good, relatively cheap. You can get a bottle of creatine for like $15 off
Mix it
Amazon.
mix it into water though. Don't do what they're doing on the kids are
Yeah,
doing on
don't
social
don't.
media now, where you just take the powder and
Yeah,
go straight into the mouth,
yeah.
which
It
is
is it
very
is
strange.
non-water soluble, so it'll look like there's stuff floating in your water. That's
Yep.
completely fine. Just
Yep.
chug it down. The next one, number 2, is carb up. Now I know that the big fad out there, or one of the big fads out there when it comes to dieting, is to do a low carb diet, and that's completely fine. But when they're talking about low carb diet, they're talking about like white potatoes, not white rice, but your brown rice. It's a little harder to break down than the white rice. Breads, things of that nature. So pizza crusts, all of those things. But the good carbs, things like apples, grapes, bananas, they all have carbohydrates in them in the form of sugars, but their natural sugars are a lot easier for your body to break down. Your body's built to break down these natural sugars. So if you're going to take in carbs, it is highly suggested you try to get those carbs from things like natural sources like fruits.
Yeah, it's like simple carbs versus complex
Mm-hmm.
carbs. Simple carbs are the ones that are just they're bad for you. They stick to you. It's the sugars and it's the concentrates and the glucose and the fructoses and
Mm-hmm.
high fructose corn syrup, and corn syrup is in anything sweet you eat these days. So
Yeah.
try to avoid that, because you can eat things that have more natural sugars or more natural ingredients. Again, like raw grains and things like that. Those are still carbs. Grains, rice, fruits, and there's still sugars in fruits, but they're complex carbohydrates. Your body can break them down and use them more than them just being junk that runs through your body.
Absolutely. And those processed sugars also, when they get in there and they do start to burn off, they don't satiate you. They leave you feeling like you want more,
Mm-hmm.
and it will lead to overeating at times. Number 3 is drink more water and avoid sodas. I was never a huge soda drinker. I always drank a decent amount of water, but I will say about the past 5 days now, I've been carrying around a gallon jug with me and trying to drink a gallon of water on a daily basis, which, one, didn't realize how much a gallon of water actually is, and two, I've become very familiar with where restrooms are at all
Right?
times.
I
Because it'll just hit you like, oh God, I gotta go
Yeah.
again.
Like in my world, I'm on the phone all day. I'm in
Yeah.
meetings on camera, and I have to. It's hard to like shut the camera off. And then somebody, my bathroom in my house is right near my office, and so I've had to mute my microphone a couple times, turn off my camera, step away. And then somebody's like, "Hey, Matt, what do you think about this?" And I'm like, "I'm not near the phone right now. I had to go to the bathroom." But same thing. I drink water and black coffee. I don't drink much else. I rarely, if ever, have pop. I will occasionally have a beer or a bourbon or a wine or something along those lines. Don't even drink a whole lot of that. And I will tell you, if you are a person who regularly drinks alcohol, and maybe you going back to your numbers, you get your blood drawn, and they're like, hey, you've got high numbers here and high numbers there, and hey, I'm always tired or I'm always worn out or whatever. Uh, Cutting some of those sugars to include alcohol out of your diet can be game changing. And I've
Absolutely.
recently done some of this. I've recently tried to eat a little bit leaner. I'm not on a diet by any means. Again, I knew my numbers. I got some blood work done recently, and they said, hey, watch this, watch this liver number and watch this cholesterol number. And so I've tried to peel back on eating sugars and candies and things like that. Again, never a big pop drinker or juice or anything like that. Black coffee is, by the way, one of the best things you can put into your body for your liver. It's also one of the best things you can put into your body for your colon, for colon health or digestive health, because it stimulates all the stuff. But cut out some of that garbage and try it for a week and see how you feel. I promise this to anybody, you'll probably feel a little bit better, unless you have something else going on.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I had my blood drawn last Friday,
Mm-hmm.
and I was actually supposed to go and see the doctor this morning, but my new work schedule, the appointment was made with my old work schedule, so couldn't go this morning. I'll have to reschedule. But
Right.
The next one on this list, number 4, foam rolling. If you don't know, again, you can look on Amazon or any of your local sporting goods stores should have them. Foam rollers have become more and more popular over the past few years. Essentially, if you're a lifter or if you run or whatever it is you do, you play football, you have some bumps and bruises or some tight muscles, you can lay this thing down on the floor, and it's just like a rolling pin for dough. But in this case, you're the dough, and you just roll yourself over the foam roller. Your body weight applies the pressure, and it's to help loosen up some of those tight joints, tight muscles around the joints as well. It's not a end all be all. It's not something that's going to fix you. It's made for sore muscles, trying to relieve some of the stored up chemicals that are keeping those muscles tight. If you have a serious injury, though, the foam roller is not going to fix it. That is something you do have to go see a professional about. So don't think a foam roller is going to be the the thing that makes your back that's been bothering you for 20 years magically be better.
Yeah,
but if let's say you went to the gym yesterday and you did this new exercise that you saw this 300-pound monster doing on Instagram, and you think you can do it, and you maybe tweaked a muscle, it might help that muscle a little bit with the recovery.
Yeah, it's keeping the muscles limber
Mhm.
too. I mean, this is the thing. Your muscles are groups of fibers, right?
Mhm.
And if you are constantly sitting on them or using the same, you're sitting at your desk with your hands up on your computer and your keyboard, pecking away at the keyboard all day, you are keeping your muscles in the same location. It's kind of like when you lay on the couch and watch a movie and you're laying in the same position for a half an hour, and then suddenly you realize, like, oh, my neck is really stiff. It's because everything got sort of sedentary there. It was like, I'm just going to sit right here and not move. Your muscles have to be kept limber. Not to jump ahead, but the next one is about keeping your muscles limber. Go ahead, Tim. You're on. We got you on mute.
I am on mute. But number 5 is stretching. So foam rolling, static stretching, and dynamic warm-ups all go together to make minor aches and pains decrease, as well as improve overall flexibility and mobility. So we just talked about the foam rolling. Everybody's, familiar with static stretching. It's, you're standing there, you spread your feet out, you bend down to the floor, get your fingertips as back far as you can. You sit there, with your feet out, try to stretch out and touch your toes. You can throw one leg over and stretch your back. You can pull an arm across your chest and stretch your shoulders and your upper back, things of that nature. Those are all static stretches. Those are good to keep the muscles just kind of limber and loose. For people that like to do high intensity things, or for anybody that lifts weights in a gym, I would very much recommend finding a dynamic warm-up type of thing. And if anybody is watching or hears this and would like some more information on some sort of dynamic warm-ups, find me on social media, hit me up with a direct message. I can share with you some information I have from professionals, not from me. These are from professionals, some dynamic warm-ups and things of that nature, some body tests throughout your body. You can check your upper body, your hips, and then your feet and ankles for basic mobility issues. And based off of how well you do in those 3 areas of your body, there's some stretches and exercises to help you out. And if you have some hip pains or some knee pains, there's exercises that'll work on that area of the body specifically that could help you out and keep you moving in the right direction.
And this is also, again, stretching is also a game changer for people who might be sitting around, sitting in an office chair all day long. You're not getting a whole lot of movement. Your back hurts, your legs hurt, your neck hurts. We tend to do this. We look down at our phones all day while we're sitting at a red light, or we're sitting at our desks. We hold them down here because nobody's going to look at their phone by holding it up here, because that's too much work, right? You got to hold your arms up. So then when you're doing that, your head weighs X amount of pounds, and all these little tiny muscles in your neck, which are not probably designed to hold up the whole weight of your head for extended periods of time, are all pulling and stretching throughout your back. And that can cause a lot of upper back pain. It can cause a lot of neck pain for people, headaches, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And stretching can solve a lot of those problems. So you don't have to be in the gym twice a day to be a serial stretcher. You could stretch when you wake up in the morning or before you go to bed, or both. If you sit in an office chair like I do, I'm on the phone a lot. I try to stand up. I have a standing desk as much as I can. I try to get up and move around. But if you don't have that luxury, make sure you're stretching. The other thing the article doesn't talk about that we all know is stretching releases certain chemicals into your body that make your body feel good. Mm-hmm. There are certain chemicals that are released when you do virtually anything of exercise that are the good chemicals. Your brain responds to them good. It's the reason why after you take a walk or after you do even a light workout, you feel like you got more energy versus when you have been laying around all day eating candy. So
Absolutely.
something to bear in mind. It's all good for you. It's all good for your heart. It's good for your brain.
It absolutely is. And then number 6, it's a big one in my world right now, resistance training. If you don't know what resistance training is, that is essentially weightlifting, or we're seeing more and more of the resistance bands come into play nowadays. But resistance training, you can do it really easy at your home. You get some of those resistant bands. You can hook them to your doorway. Do some minor pulling, some pushing exercises. Just keep those muscles engaged. It's one of those things where, especially as the older we get, the body begins to find ways to be as efficient as possible. So if for whatever reason, Matt keeps bringing up that everyday office worker who's sitting at the desk most of their day, they're going to get some forward shoulder lean from leaning over their keyboard and typing all day. Eventually that becomes their posture. Keep them shoulders back, keep sitting up straight. If you don't ever have to raise anything above your head, your body's going to say, well, we don't need to do that. It's going to start to prune that off. So instead of being able to put your hand the whole way up, you're only going to be able to lift your arm, to 90 degrees or whatever. So things like resistance training, it keeps those muscles moving in ways that are natural. Things like squat, that is a real world movement. Being able to squat down, get ground level with young kids, for sports, things of that nature. If you don't do those sort of movements on a regular basis and keep those muscles engaged, the body will say, we don't need to be able to do this.
Right.
So I think resistance training is a great added to this article. Number 7 is cardio. For me, for the longest time, when I heard the word cardio, I pictured, either myself on a PFT run or in a formation, and I was like, I don't want to run.
Sweating it out, huffing and puffing. I just ran 8 miles with a 20-pound backpack on.
You know what? Running in retrospect wasn't that terrible.
It wasn't terrible.
And for my age and my weight and size anymore, I can still run pretty daggone well.
Yep.
I prefer, for my own joints and things of that nature, I prefer walking now. You're still burning off calories. You're still getting that cardiovascular workout. You're getting that blood flow through your body. But you can do things like elliptical machines, rower machines. Those are also very, very light on the joint damage. You're not beating yourself up over time. A lot of, especially long distance runners, begin to start develop issues with their ankles, knees, and their hips. So
yeah, you don't have to work out. You don't have to be in the gym pumping iron, and you don't have to do any of that stuff to be in shape. And as Tim mentioned, like the body is looking for efficiency, and it's efficiency based on what you do on a day-to-day basis. Human beings are not meant to sit around. We were walkers. We were hunter gatherers, in nature before we got grocery stores and computers. And so we're not even necessarily runners. That's why a person can get up and effectively walk for 20 or 30 miles. If you really needed to, you could walk that far. It's probably virtually impossible for most people to run 20 or 30 miles because we weren't really designed as runners. I know some runners will probably disagree with me, but Robin Schumacher would disagree with me because that's what she used to do every morning for like 10 miles. Like, I like to run. I'm like, I don't know how you do it. I don't want to do it. But the thing is that you don't have to be in the gym lifting 400 pounds and grunting and setting off the lunk alarm at Planet Fitness, in order to get a workout. You can do any number of things like dips and stretches and walks and, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, just keeping the muscles activated. Number 8 is try to go natural. It is ridiculously hard to do this in today's environment, but try to avoid as much processed food as possible. Stay away from the Burger Kings and McDonald's, all of those things as much as you possibly can. I understand, especially as you get older and you start having a family, the young kids, I want a Happy Meal, or I want to go to Burger King, or I want a pizza. It's fine. Go ahead every once in a while, but don't make it a daily occurrence. Every day for lunch break, don't swing down the road to the local fast food chain and buy yourself a value meal. Pack a lunch, have some sliced meats and cheeses at home, make yourself a sandwich when you get home. Try to, find that chicken breast that's been sitting in your freezer for the past year and a half, break it out, thaw it out, cook that thing up for yourself, maybe a steamed vegetable, and throw in a potato or some rice or just something that's a starch. Try to have as many natural resources for food as you possibly can.
I've had a lot of people. By the way, Art Ramirez says I've lost 45 pounds this year by simply eating less sugar and walking.
That's absolutely
it really
amazing.
is. It's my wife and I walk almost every day. We walk about 2.5, 3 miles, and she complains because I think it's easier for me to lose weight. She complains that she doesn't. Like, I can stop drinking pop and I lose 20 pounds. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I can just not look at an ice cream cone and I'll lose 10 pounds. I think it's harder for women in some cases, but this is, all of this comes back to it's just getting in these routines and looking for the ability to find what humans would do in a natural level basis. I've heard people argue, by the way, that it's really hard to eat healthier. It's more expensive and it's cheaper to go get the Big Mac and it's cheaper to get I disagree.
Frozen vegetables are very cheap.
Frozen vegetables and raw meats, chicken, you can buy a couple pounds of chicken, and while the initial investment might be 10 or 15 bucks, that gives you food for multiple meals. You don't have to eat it all at once. So, and I'll tell you, with the way the prices are going in terms of food and fast food and things like that, when you have to pay your employees more, you have to pay more for the Big Mac, and so the Big Mac's going to become more expensive. Used to be when I was a high schooler, I used to go to McDonald's and I'd get the number 2, the 2 cheeseburger meal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was $2. It was $1.99. It's I haven't bought one of these in years. It's probably somewhere, $6 or $7 now. So as inflation happens and as people are getting paid more, people are demanding higher salaries, all your food costs are going up.
Go up, yep.
But like, you can still go to Costco and buy a bunch of chicken and frozen vegetables and use those as a meal. Use different spices, make them taste different. Think about add some cream of chicken to a chicken breast and drop some potatoes in there in a crock pot and cook it for 4 hours.
Yeah. When I'm really dialed in, I'll go to the BJ's or the Costco's or Sam's, whatever it is.
Yep.
You buy that big family pack of chicken. It's $15 for that. I buy myself a bunch of bags of frozen broccoli and like a 10-pound bag of white rice. I'll cook up a bunch of white rice. I'll steam up all my broccoli. I'll cook up all my chicken. And like Matt said, I'll do some with, some Southern spices. I'll do some with some adobo seasoning. I'll do some with some Southwest seasoning. I have, 4 or 5 different seasonings. I throw some chicken breasts in a container. I slap some rice and broccoli in there. And so every day as I grab one out of the fridge, I don't know which seasoning I got. Every day is just a little bit different. It keeps things a little bit fresh. Yep. Number 9 on this list is learn more. So not every diet is going to work for everybody. Not every exercise plan is going to work for everybody, but go out there, do some research on your own, do a little bit of experimenting, with different fitness programs and food plans. Find the one that works for you. I will say that, especially for individuals trying to lose weight, as you begin to work out, as long as you're not doing, hours upon hours of cardio, again, the body's very natural to the signals you're sending it. But if you're doing hours of cardio, it's going to say we need to be very greedy, with our fat storage, and we need to try to maintain as much of this as we can. If you're sending the body, just regular signals of usage, though, it's going to say, hey, we need to be active. We need to burn these calories off. So the more active you are, your body will naturally burn more calories, and you'll actually be able to eat more and maintain your weight, or possibly even lose weight. So just go out there, find an exercise program that works for you. And my biggest suggestion would be, if you see these long distance runners and you like the way their bodies look, if you don't like running, that's not going to work for you.
Right.
If you, think I should run, but you hate running, but you like lifting weights, go lift weights, because that's something you're going to stick to. If you hate lifting weights, don't find yourself in the gym trying to be that lunkhead. Go out there and, get on the exercise bike or get in the pool, swim some laps. Find that thing that you like to do, because that's the one you're going to want to stick with longer. And then number 10.
I was going to say, and look for incremental gains. You're not going to don't go to the gym and be like, I got to be able to bench 300 today. It doesn't work that way. You're going to end up hurting yourself, and it's going to hurt. And then you're going to be like, I'm done with this. You don't have to run 3 miles right away.
I will say that is something that painfully I had to learn myself throughout the years. Especially as the younger I was like, I can do it. Watch this. And then I might be able to pull it off. The next day I'm going, what did I do that for? Yeah.
Or I've been going to the gym for a week and I don't notice anything different. I mean, you're talking about like the people you see in magazines or on TV that have like really good bodies. They've been doing this for years. It's not to say that it has to take you years, but if you want to build that up and maintain it, you have to get there. It's incremental gains. It's not going to happen overnight. So you got to kind of stick with it and stay motivated.
Same thing when you put the weight on. It
Yeah.
gradually gained, came on, and one day you finally went, this is enough. I have to do something about it.
Right.
It's not just going to all fall off the very first day. And that leads us directly into number 10, and that is to stay motivated. We're not going to have those days where we wake up and go, I'm hitting the gym today, or I'm going to go out on that run. We're going to have those days where we wake up and I don't want to do this. Those are the days where you need to look yourself in the mirror. And as, again, I'll reference him, Mr. Joe Rogan says, you need to beat your inner bitch.
Mm-hmm.
You need to say, no, I don't care if I'm tired. I don't care if I'm hungover. I don't care what it is. You need to go out there, get that 30 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, get that activity in. As Matt said, I promise you'll feel better afterwards. And then it's done. And those days of motivation, it just makes it easier and easier and easier to keep it going.
It stops. I mean, a couple of years ago, I started going back to the gym on a regular basis, and I know we're out of time here, but I started, it hurt. My muscles hurt. And then I realized I kind of liked the ache. Every day I wanted a little bit more ache the next day in different muscle groups. So I wanted my arms to ache a little bit, because then I felt like after I got used to it, I'm like, well, my muscles don't ache anymore. Does that mean they're not growing? And I don't know. Some expert could probably tell me, yes, that's true. But what had happened was that my body just got used to going in there and kind of pushing a little bit harder each time.
The signal.
And I also started to realize I was much stronger. I had more muscle capacity. When I was outside doing work in my yard, I had more energy to do it. I wasn't like, all right, I'm tired, my back hurts. And this was after about a month. After about a month, my body was sort of used to being pushed a little bit harder and doing a little bit more. And then I became motivated to continue it. It's really hard to do that when you got kids and a job. I realize that I am a product of that. I'm always like, I don't have time. I got sports practice every day after work, and I don't want to wake up earlier than I already do to go, to go work out or something like that. But you got to find the time. If you really want it, you got to find the time. And it's just those little incremental things. Start stretching, start doing some push-ups and dips in your living room. Little resistance training. You don't have to have a gym membership.
Absolutely. Yeah. Personally, weightlifter, I bought myself the big set of weights and the dip, machine and the power rack and all those things. You don't have to have all that. The resistance bands are, somewhere between 10 and 20 bucks on Amazon. You can get the foam roller for 10, 20 bucks on Amazon. A lot of these things here are very relatively cheap. You can find 10 minutes a day to go outside and have a walk. And then as you sit down at night to have that half hour or hour of television, that first commercial, bang out 10 push-ups, bang out 20 sit-ups. There you go. You've been active for the day. It's not much, but it's more than you did the day before.
Speaking of your weights, Tim, which way is your gym? Is it over there? Or?
Right over there. Right over here.
Okay. Gotcha. Appreciate that.
Yeah. That's me walking past the pool.
Yeah.
Which way is the gym?
Shirt barely fits me.
Yeah.
This extra large shirt barely fits me.
But yeah, so that's all the information we have for you this week. It was another fantastic episode. Again, if anybody made it this far and they are interested, you can reach out to me. I have some professionally built programs and things I am more than willing to share. I pay good money for this, and the people do deserve the money that made these programs, but it is, they're making these programs to help other people out. And so I'll pass it on as well. But other than that, you can catch us on all the major social media platforms as well as podcast platforms. Give us a like, rating, review. Let other people know about us. And we'll talk to you guys right here next week on Beyond the Wire.